Should you sell your video game collection? This is a big question that I see floating around all the time on YouTube from these big retro game channels. And it's really disheartening to see a lot of them throw in the towel. But I understand why people think about it. Game prices go up, the economy's pretty bad right now. You really start to wonder maybe you should sell off some of your collection. Maybe you should sell off the whole collection. Maybe you should just quit the hobby altogether. I'm going to give my take on it because there's a lot of different things to consider. So we're going to go ahead and do that. This is from the perspective of a retro video game store employee. But don't worry, we got some stuff to look at. I pulled out some old guides and magazines that we're going to flip through while I go ahead and talk about the subject at hand. We'll start with good old Nintendo Power here. So, should you sell your collection? Well, the way I look at it, there's two golden rules that take precedence over anything else. And if any of these two golden rules apply to you, the answer is yes. You're going to sell your collection, or you're going to sell part of your collection. And I think is the right decision 100% of the time. That's why they're called golden rules. First golden rule is you have to sell your collection. This usually comes in the form of an angry spouse, or you're having a new kid, or having your first kid. Maybe you're moving someplace very far away and you just can't transport your entire collection. Maybe there's a serious bill that needs to be paid. It could take all sorts of forms, but those are the most common ones. And unfortunately, if you have to sell your collection, well, you got to sell it. It sucks, and it'd be tough to make peace with that. There can be workarounds, stuff like that. But usually if it's you have to sell it sort of situation, well, you got to sell it. Now, usually this doesn't mean getting rid of everything. You should always keep a hold of some of the stuff that matters to you the most, because usually it's a situation of you need space or you need to transport something that's not nearly as big. Games are pretty small, all things considered. I mean, this is like saying if someone's trying to convince you have to get rid of everything, that's like you can't keep a single book or something. Games are not very big. Even collector's editions, I'm certain you can find space for. Though, obviously, everyone's got different... well, what is this? Like a hamburger head going on here. That's why I picked up these guides. But usually you can keep some of it. That's the first golden rule. The second golden rule is if the money you will get from the game that you are selling greatly outweighs the personal value that comes from actually owning it. Now, you don't need to necessarily play the game. Just having something that you love is a very legitimate thing. People own all sorts of things and never play them or use them. Posters and sports trophies and memorabilia, jerseys from former players, all sorts of things people just keep to have as something to enjoy. And that's a completely legitimate point. But if not even that is very strong for you, you need to go ahead and sell. If you don't even play it and it's something you're not going to miss, if there's a certain monetary value that can be gotten from it, you need to go for it. You need to go ahead and pull the trigger on it, in my opinion. So much so that I think it's a golden rule that you need to do. So those are two golden rules. Basically, you will absolutely sell in these situations because I think it would be silly not to. If you're keeping things for the sake of keeping them and you don't even really enjoy keeping them and you don't play them, you can't really let that dictate your whole hobby, which is what this is. Collecting is your hobby. If you want to, go ahead, but I think you're making a bit of a mistake there. There are some other things to consider about whether or not you should sell. What are some points for why you shouldn't sell? Well, a lot of good reasons why. The first of which is you don't really have to. If you're not really in a situation where you need to necessarily sell your games, then don't sell them. Really simple as that, especially if you believe that they're going to appreciate in value. And usually they do. Not always, but usually they spike to some degree, kind of like GameCube now. They'll spike in price, and then you should sell. No. But if you really don't need the money, and if it's something you play or value, then obviously keep it. And not playing something but having it is legitimate. Like I said earlier, people keep all sorts of weird things in their house as decorations, posters, all that stuff. That's just kind of how life is in a first world country. No shame in that. There's zero shame in doing that. Another situation you wouldn't want to sell in is if it's not worth the money. And this can be a tougher one to feel out. You need to be very knowledgeable about what it is you have, and be conscious of, you're going to be alive in 10 years. What's this game going to look like in 10 years? A perfect example of this for me is Robotrek. Robotrek Super Nintendo RPG, worth, $300 for a complete in box, maybe $100 to $120 for just the cartridge. Put that into perspective, you could sell, as of recording this, you could sell Earthbound loose, as in no complete in box, for around 3 times that. But do you think I would sell Robotrek for even $300 myself? If I had it, do you think I would sell it? For me personally, the answer is no, because I know that there's only 20,000 copies of Robotrek sold in North America. We know this because Quartet used to run a website in Japan, and they used to disclose how many copies of their games sold in North America. And there's only 20,000 copies sold of Robotrek. So we know it's an exceedingly rare game. It's a very hard game to find. By contrast, we know that Earthbound sold 500,000 copies. Now, obviously, people want Earthbound more than Robotrek, but something that you need to consider is how difficult is it going to be to get it back? And a lot of cases, and how expensive, how much more expensive will it be to get back? You see what I'm saying? You could get rid of Robotrek today, maybe 10 years down the life. You're like, you know what? I'm going to get back into collecting. And Robotrek's a really unique, awesome game, and I'm super into Super Nintendo RPGs. So I'm going to go and pick it up. Well, now it's a bit pricier, significantly so, because of how rare it is. That's something you should consider is how difficult it's actually going to be to find it, especially if you're into very minty copies of these games, these original boxes. If that's something you're very passionate about, that's something you need to consider, is the difficulty of reobtaining that. By that same virtue, however, the flip side of this is that you also shouldn't be afraid of selling if it's just a matter of money. No one wants to sell a game and have to rebuy it later. I understand that completely. And it's a legitimate thing, but you can't let that necessarily dictate your entire hobby and how you go about collecting. If it's just a matter of throwing money, and it's around the same amount of money, at something, you're probably going to lose out, yeah, but at the same time, it's not like you lose out for good, is kind of what I'm trying to get at here. If you sell a game for $70, and later down the line you decide, well, I actually want that game again, but now it's like 80 or maybe it's still 70. Yes, you are losing out, but it's not like you are losing out permanently. The door isn't closing for good on that game. It's not like, oh, well, sorry, there's only 20,000 copies of Robotrek, so you know what I mean? All right, top secret Nintendo passwords. That's something to consider, is that door going to be open, and is that a very easy door to get through? Another example would be like Resident Evil for the PlayStation. PlayStation 1 Resident Evil games, I'm fairly certain that I'm going to be able to find them in the future. I don't think they're going anywhere anytime soon. I think it'll be quite a long time. So, if I do decide to sell Resident Evil, it's not going to be the end of the world if I ever want to get back into collecting. And that's something you should consider. what are other situations where you should consider selling? Well, maybe you don't necessarily need the money, but having the money to spend, even on the rest of the hobby, is good. Is very opportunity cost is a very real thing in the hobby, basically. Especially if you're someone who's going out to these conventions, if you're going out to these retro game stores like ours, and you're going to these, garage sales and all that jazz. If you're going through all this stuff, if you're really out there hunting, you need to have cash in your pocket in order to jump on the opportunity. And if you don't, then, you could arguably be wasting your time. If you come across a great deal, but you don't really have the money to spend on that, then I guess you're not getting that deal, are you? It's really what it comes down to. And if the fact that you missed out on that deal that you really, really wanted because you weren't willing to part with a game that you just sort of kind of enjoyed having, well, you could probably be kicking yourself in the rear end there. The truth is, take it from a retro video game store. The more you wheel and deal, the more stuff you will acquire. That's just how it is. But you really have to hustle, and I understand people not wanting to do that kind of thing. For some people, that is the enjoyment of the hobby. Other things you may want to consider why you would sell your game is if the money you get from the game is the deal breaker for a very large purchase, for a very important purchase. Something like a car or a house, though you would have to have an insane collection to get a house or to go to college or something like that. An example, now I wouldn't say this is as important, but our employee here sold 3 of his games so that he could secure getting a Steam Deck. That's a legitimate purchase, but if you're talking about something like getting a car or making space in your house, stuff like that, college, who knows what. I don't know what kind of collections you guys got. Anything that's a really, really big opportunity, I would say, then it's definitely worth cashing out, because those doors don't always open in life. And if you have the ability to open that door by selling some video games, in my honest opinion, I think you should. It's your decision. You can do whatever you want, but sometimes a lot of people don't have that opportunity so easily. I'm not trying to be mean here to be like, well, I could sell these games and make this happen. I could make this move. And that's just a good thing in my mind. If I had a very big collection and I was able to get a really good deal on a car or something like that, I would do it. Sometimes those big investments, those things that change your life sort of mentality. Like, it could take many forms, really a whole bunch of things. Another reason you might want to consider selling is if you want to get into a different hobby, or you want to get your feet into a different hobby. Maybe you aren't pressed for cash in life. You aren't desperate to sell your collection, so to say. But, you'd really like to get into Warhammer or something like that. You could part with part of your collection, and you could dip your toes into one of these expensive hobbies. Warhammer, Magic the Gathering, could be collecting something else. It could be all sorts of different things. Having cash to spend on the things you enjoy is completely legitimate. That's just how it is. Even if you have an awesome job, tons of money, great collection, hey, there's no shortage of awesome things you can buy. You could straight up get an arcade machine if you are looking at that kind of income and you have that kind of game room setup going. It could be setting up the game room, stuff like that. Those are, you definitely, if you're someone who's into arcade machines, dude, you have to have the cash in your hand in order to make that happen, because those things, the deal is there for the moment and then it's gone. And if you don't take the deal, you may never see it again. And that's just how it is for some of these high-end games, some of these arcade machines, for example, all sorts of stuff. Another reason you might want to sell some stuff is to get the game room going. There's a lot of other costs associated with game rooms. asides the games themselves, lighting. Maybe you want to really deck the whole thing out. It depends on what kind of situation you got. Furnishing, all that stuff, shelving, that costs money. And if you can sell games and make it happen, and the time is right and it's a good opportunity, then go for it. By this same measure, though, you want to keep in mind that sometimes money is just a matter of time. Especially if you're blessed and you have a great job, all that jazz. Sometimes money is just a matter of time, and maybe you shouldn't sell. We have an example here in the store. We have a really, really clean Bucky O'Hare, and we're trying to sell it for $1,000 here in the store. We've tried to sell it for $700 on our claim sales that we do. No one bought it. But realistically, this is my personal take, by the way. Realistically speaking, if you think someone walked in and was like, hey, I'll buy Bucky O'Hare for $1,000, of course we would sell it to him. We're a video game store. We sell the games. That's just what we do. But at the same time, do you think we are really hurting to sell it? I can tell you that, I'm not going to disclose the income or anything, but I can tell you by the end of the week, we will have made $1,000 here in the store. And I can also tell you that we will probably never see a very clean Bucky O'Hare complete in box like that ever again. It's just probably not going to happen. And if you have something like that in your collection, and if money is just a matter of time, a matter of being patient, a matter of spending wisely and stuff like that, then maybe don't pull the trigger. Now, the penultimate question here is obviously, should you quit collecting as a whole? And that's just a silly question to ask if you ask me. The answer is no. Seeing all these people, well, first, all these people claiming online they're going to quit collecting, that's not going to happen. No, they're not quitting collecting, especially when their YouTube channel was built upon collecting. They're not going to give that up. Should you pull it back, though? Yeah, I mean, obviously, that's something to consider. But at the end of the day, this is your hobby. And unless you've truly come to hate the hobby, I don't see why you should quit, personally speaking. I'm not saying go out and waste money. I'm not saying go out and spend money you can't spend. I'm not saying don't be, upset that prices aren't like they used to be or whatever. I'm saying don't quit something that you love. If it's a hobby you enjoy, don't quit it. This is your life. This is your enjoyment. These are things you make you excited. These are things you enjoy speaking with other people about. Stay in it. Keep at it. Personally, I think you just need to find a different way to enjoy it. The truth is that most games are cheap in retro video games. Most games are cheap. The amount of games that are actually crazy expensive is nowhere near what people claim online. That just isn't the case. I can stand right up, walk out through this door, and point this camera at a whole shelf full of games that are all under $30. And I'm not talking about crappy games that people don't like. No, that's not the case. There are lots of amazing games for a lot of systems. It's only very, very particular systems that become, frankly, absurd to collect for entirely. Something like, if you're doing Sega Saturn or something like that, it's going to be absurd. That's just how it is. A lot of times in those instances, you just got to wait, and prices will cool off. And even the same with stocks. When prices spike, you just got to give it time for it to cool off. Give time for wages to catch up, because this just kind of ebbs and flows the same way with the economy. You can't be convincing yourself that it is somehow not tied to the U.S. dollar. If you're spending money and it's U.S. dollars, it is tied to the economy here in the United States. And that means when there's a bunch of money given out or whatever, you see a whole bunch of collectibles spike in price, that means games are going to follow suit. That means when things become more expensive, it follows the same flow. It all flows the same. for the most part. There are outliers here and there. But yeah, don't quit the hobby. There's just so many odd, weird games. I mean, look at this. All these racing games here. I've never even heard of this. Los Angeles Nightway. I've never heard of any of these games. This is one game, Rad Racer 2. Games I haven't heard of. There's whole systems to look into. There's always going to be new systems, and those new systems are always going to be old one day. There's a lot of awesome original Xbox games, and they're still really cheap. You could totally get into the original Xbox and have an awesome time. But yeah, that's the video. Long and short of it is, I think you need to be comfortable with selling to some degree. Give it a try. I can respect people who definitely never sell. I can respect that mentality, but kind of be comfortable with having money ready to spend on the hobby, especially if you're out there trying to make these deals happen. That's the video. Let me know in the comments below if you thought it was cool. You want to see more stuff like this, more conversational stuff, or maybe you want to see more strategy guys showing off. Till next time.